It's funny. They're just de facto paid by other means comms people for the Democrat Socialists. I wonder if like Republicans understand that. I think most in this state, particularly the office holders, don't. You know how I know? Because they're always sidling up and defiling themselves by trying to get in good, have good relationships. So I know this person and I know that person.
And I can get the exclusive. I won't be,
They
left
care-
out when they do one-on-ones. That's the big thing.
They care about gossip girls like Rich Miller in Springfield, who, people listening, unless you're inside the bubble, have no idea, nor do you need to have any idea. And so this is not like some I'm a hero in this story thing. I'm just describing how they operate. Could be me. It could be our next guest, Brian Timpone. It is both of us. Could be others. Anybody who tries to do anything that is of a conservative reform variety, that is against the bipartisan combine, as John Cass terms it, well, they become a target because they're, as an effort to send the message in the political ecosystem, don't even try it. Don't even try it. We will accept, for the purposes of pretend, surrender Republicans like a Jim Durkin or a John Curran or, the litany of jellyfish that have served in leadership positions in the Republican Party over the last 20 years. We'll accept them because they know their place. They're not trying to win. They're not trying to do anything. They're just sitting around waiting for table scraps from us, and that's fine. It gives the appearance that we have a two-party state, which we don't. But if you go outside of those boundaries and actually try to take out those Vichy Republicans that we prop up, much less ourselves, well, then we got a problem. Then we have to unleash the resources that we have at our disposal. So we'll litigate and in the courts, and we'll and the administrative agencies, and we'll castigate in the Chicago and Springfield press corps, which is what they do, which is why every time, if I get a jaywalking ticket, it's, a 400-word piece from Greg Hines.
We'll stop jaywalking.
Exactly. That's on
and
me.
Stop speeding.
That's on me.
Too,
Right.
please.
Exactly. If I would follow the law and cross in the crosswalk, we wouldn't have these problems. Right. Exactly. And so the latest iteration of this, which is has become sort of a quarterly story about the newspapers that garnered so much attention during the 2022 gubernatorial campaign. ProPublica does a hit, and then Politico will do a hit. They take turns. And then more recently, yesterday, the Amazon Post, the Bezos rag, they did a hit. And it's the same thing over and over again. Pink slime, fake newspapers. They're peeling back the layers to show what's really happening. And then the local outlets cut and paste because, these people may be committed leftists, but they're also lazy. Cut and paste from the Washington Post to do their own stories in places like Crain's and the Chicago Tribune, as perhaps you saw.
Yes, and the picture that they used of you was from your 8th grade graduation.
I
mean, 8th or 7th grade, I don't know.
It's fine because I still look the same. That's not fake news. My youthful
you look
glow.
Really good. Wow.
Yeah.
Woo.
So this story I mentioned, I love the headline too.
What's it? Yeah.
Well, remember when I sold my condo?
Right.
Even Dennis Rodkin at Crane's like, this is just about people of some profile. Real estate transactions. That's all I do. But the headline was that Dan Proft, publisher of fake newspapers, sells condo. They have to. They can't help themselves, and it really is. It's comedy. But I hope Republicans see that the slings and arrows that we're taking to do the stuff that we do, which is fine. Again, this is not heroic because other people take slings and arrows as well, and more should. If you think like that, all you have to do is do nothing, and you won't be targeted. Number one, that's not true. And number two, Well, then you're playing into their hands, because if you don't do anything except march to their beats, except operate within the parameters they set, well, then how do you turn around and complain about how the state has become the worst governed in American history? Life is risk. You know what I mean? Anyway, so the Cranes report allegedly reveals how Dan Proft's news sausage gets made. And by the way, again, as I stated during the campaign, it's not my newspaper group. I don't have any involvement in the day-to-day operation of the newspapers. So I'm just used because they've created a brand out of me, the Chicago Press Corps, DC outlet. They've created a brand out of me to say this is like a representation of conservative evil, and conservative and evil are synonyms for them. But so anything Dan Proft is, you're just supposed to read conservative, evil, darkness, so on and so forth. A unsettling element in Chicago and Illinois politics. And to a lesser extent, our next guest is used that way as well. He's Brian Timpone. He's the founder of Metric Media, and he joins us now. Brian, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Hey, guys. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
So as a fellow unsettling force in Illinois and Chicago politics, the story in the Amazon Post, financed by Jeff Bezos, billionaire, by the way, that story focuses on this platform and portal by which people can pitch stories. And it's presented as some sort of nefarious thing. Explain what it is and compare and contrast it to how the corporate media like the Washington Post, Amazon Post, or the Chicago Tribune operates.
Well, so before I do that, I just want to explain that I worked as a reporter in Chicago and in Springfield. So it's not like we made this concept up not knowing how it actually worked. As Trump famously said, I know these people and they're worse than you think. I worked in Springfield with all the people you named and others, all the critics. I know exactly how they get their story ideas, which is go out for drinks at some bar and I schmooze you, like Greg Pratt's going to write something nice about Kim Fox because someday when he gets fired from the Tribune, she'll hire him whatever nonprofit where she settles, or as the comms guy at her law firm, or for her next political run. So the way stories are pitched today, and Amy, you know this quite well, is a bunch of back scratching. I email you, maybe you know me, I get a favor from some PR person,
Yep.
so on and so forth. So we created we take emails too from everybody, but we created this portal where you register and log in, and it's actually used by thousands of people, not political people, anybody, church, nonprofit, so they can send their stories into us. They can pitch them and see if they meet our requirements. If they do, they get accepted, and they can follow along and see when the story is going to be published. And so just a way to get more community news. I was a community news publisher in Central Illinois. Community news is not selective news. It's kind of everything that fits the structure. So we don't make judgments about what we think is politically fits the narrative. We publish everything, and our editors are not conservatives. They follow our rules. And it's funny. Most of our editors are liberals, and they really like what we do because they're pro free speech. And there was once a time when people were like that. So that's the system, and it was not some big eureka moment. When you give 1,000 people access to something, we always knew that some idiot would try to give it to a newspaper or something and frame it that way, and that's exactly what they did. Because I'm always glad, Dan, that you get the blame for all this, even though you have nothing to do with it, which is great. And I did like the photo.
Yes.
There's no photos of you from like the last 10 years. You can add it to the panoply of framed prop selfies that adorn your home.
Well, first of all, I'm like Dick Clark. I'm ageless, so you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between a picture today and a picture from 15 years ago. So it's without point. But the suggestion, the insinuation that's made in the Amazon Post piece, though, is that this is basically, of course, doing what the DC Press Corps and the Chicago Press Corps actually do, which is just like publishing press releases that are one-sided from political candidates that the papers have decided to support. Is that accurate?
It's ridiculous. We publish any statement of substance that anyone makes about anything. So if you want to make a statement of substance attacking, me, us, anyone, we'll publish it. What we don't publish is the everyone's a racist type stuff, which is not substantive. Name calling, we would call it. So any statement that's made by any politician, we pick up. The Democrats don't want to engage with us as much, but they have, and a lot of Democrats have access to women. I'm not going to call them out, but they do, and they pitch stories all the time. And anyone who obviously lives in the Chicago ecosystem knows that because they read our stuff. But look, this guy, the hyphenated 25-year-old from Washington, D.C., who's never actually dug a real story in his life and is in this kind of fantasy land, he's going to tell us how it is. Great, write whatever story you want. Notice, by the way, guys, who the hero of the story was. It was J.B. Pritzker, the state governor who shut down our newspapers by threatening the press. So it is funny, right, that the hero is the censor, the state censor.
Right.
That's how they see the world. They're saving us from something.
Well, you got underneath Pritzker's skin, I can tell you that much.
Well, and
do you think he's responsible for this Washington Post article?
No. He's not. I mean, no.
No, and
Okay.
but and his just to refresh people's recollection, Paddock Publications, which publishes the Daily Herald among other papers, printing our newspapers, and then got it also. I mean, they know what they were. They know the newspapers and the content and the controversy they were publishing them because they're in business to make money. But then all of a sudden, they got all the pressure and and they folded. So you had to go out and get another publisher for the newspapers. But it's just so funny how behind up front they pretend to be these sort of agnostic, non-profit oriented pursuers of truth and reckoners of the powerful, and then behind the scenes, they're operating the way Paddock Publications did.
No, they want to curry favor with the powers that be. They don't want to challenge them. I remember when I started as a reporter, so I'm 50. I was in Springfield when I was 23, 24. And at the time, there were still a few reporters around who actually took seriously their job. And the Tribune reporters in particular, not the ones in Springfield, but more broadly, they knew that they would challenge the state. They were big enough to do it. They had resources. They could sue. They could write things and not be afraid of being bullied. Those days are long gone. That's what people don't realize is this kind of hollowed out media, whether it's the Daily Herald or the Sun-Times, which is owned by unions now, I know, or the Tribune. These people are there writing so they can get a job when they get done with their job writing. Whereas that's not what it was like back then, because they were building. They saw themselves as pro free speech, and they saw themselves as a bulwark against the state. Now they're just, as you call it, Dan, they are the comm shop for the state, and that's why we never talk to the Washington Post or the New York Times or whoever's writing the latest focus piece, because they're activists. And I'd say I've always been a conservative person. Grew up in Chicago. When I was a reporter, I worked for CBS affiliates. I always was trying to not be biased. I was so worried that someone would watch my newscast and think, oh, he's a Republican. I bent over backwards to try to be straight in the language and to not do what I felt like doing. But today, no one does that, as you know. And Amy, you know.
No, I would try to get a Republican response, and they say, "Oh, you don't need that." I'm like, well, yeah, I do. I need something. I can't just do this, this fluff piece on a Democratic candidate. So it's just.
Well, that's why this from the stories, the Post story, and then the
Cranes.
Yeah, the recitation of the story in Cranes and Tribune. Despite Timpone's denials, the papers and sites are partisan. The Post reports that the portal was used by GOP lawmakers in Illinois as well as candidates, while Democrats were unaware of its existence.
Oh,
Brian.
Right. go through our pages and you can see the stories we write about all parties. And you can ask a lot of Republicans in Chicago area how they feel about us. They're just as angry about the stuff we write as the Democrats are. So, look, we write serious stories that they, of course, attack. They attack us because it's you, even though it's not you, but they attack you and me sometimes over it because we were once Republicans, or maybe we are Republicans. But when we do investigations of PPP fraud or property tax rates in the south suburbs, and then they copy them, they don't give us credit. We don't really care. But they attack us because they want to attack us, and as you said earlier, they want no competition, and they don't like the way we expose their bias by our trying to do substantive things. So, no, I mean, everyone has access. If you're a Democrat and you're listening and you want to send us a story, send it in. You can send it right to me. I'll make sure it gets done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The portal, the papers and sites are partisan. I love that coming from partisans, right? They're aghast at that somebody in media has a point of view that differs from their own while they pretend to not have a point of view. That's one of the many charades that they engage in.
Well, what they're really saying is that someone with an opposing point of view needs to go through them to have their point of view represented.
That's right.
And to think about Greg Pratt as an example, I mean, here's a guy who took money from a bunch of Democrats who not only gave him money but put their name on it, which is, like you'd say poor form, but no, it was exactly what they were trying to do. Kim Foxx gave him $200 in his GoFundMe and put her name on it. She could have been anonymous.
I know.
And then he's writing glowing things about her. So just think about that. If you're critical of Kim Foxx, you've got to go to Greg Pratt, who's like 33 and has never had a real job in his life. All right, you have to go to you have to go to him and ask him, "Hey, here's my criticism of Kim Foxx." Sure. I mean,
he's writing her legacy because she doesn't want to be remembered for Jussie Smollett. Okay, and when he puts that out there, that's the kind of stuff she wants on her tombstone.
Well, the other thing too, to your point about this. They want it, that you have to go through them. What's presented as an accusation in the story. The story singles out former gubernatorial candidate Darren Bailey's campaign as being behind a pitch for a story that was later published in which Congressman Tulsi Gabbard slammed Pritzker's policies. Oh, so wait a second. So a campaign pitched a news outlet for a story about a Democrat congressman coming in to endorse a Republican gubernatorial candidate and criticize a Democrat incumbent. Gosh, what's the news peg there? Gee, I wonder that only a partisan outlet would publish such a thing. Right.
Right. So but that's actually the point is that it's, Bernie Goldberg wrote this book Bias years ago. It was excellent on the topic before really everyone kind of got wise to media bias, and people actually thought that these people were straight shooters, and they aren't. And he pointed out that it's and what you choose to cover, that there's bias, not really how you cover it. Now it's both more than ever. But he was right in what you choose to cover. Tulsi Gabbard's a national political figure and a congressman. She comes to Chicago and endorses Darren Bailey, and the quote mainstream unquote media doesn't want to even acknowledge it happened. There's a lot of that out there, and so we'll acknowledge anything happened, and we do. And I think that's why we're different. And I'm doing your show, Dan, because I think they're fair.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. But here's the thing. This is the point. We don't need to talk to them, which is why we don't, because we have our own platforms that we built or that I've been lucky enough to have. And so we'll talk to people directly. We don't need Greg Pratt and the Cranes to be our middlemen. And that's what really gets under their skin. That's a key takeaway. Brian Timpone, founder of Metric Media. Brian, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line. Coming up on Chicago's Morning Answer.
At 7:07,